at Amanda's abdominal wall strategies that she has on ultrasound to kind of identify how she's using her muscles today. So Amanda, get ready here. A little bit cold. And so what we're going to be able to see on ultrasound here is that we have the 3 layers of Amanda's abdominal wall. You'll see her external obliques, internal obliques, and transversus abdominis. And what we're most concerned with is her ability to load and control her tummy muscles in the most optimal way as she does things like head and neck lifts or leg lifts, things that she's going to be loading her spine and her tummy muscles. It might be postpartum, might be after having an episode of low back pain, anything where it's going to be essential that she is able to contract those muscles and see them visually work well or not so well. So let's have a look here, Amanda. If you go and lift your head up and then back down. Okay, and so she stays pretty still there, so you're going to have to lift your head and shoulders up. There you go, and then back down. And so you can see there that she has a really nice co-contraction strategy. So her internal obliques recruit and her transversus abdominis kind of slides laterally. So that's really good. What if you lift both of your legs up? There you go, and then another nice co-contraction strategy.
I wasn't thinking about it.
But nice and healthy, right? So we see that her transversus abdominis is able to slide lateral and stay lateral as she kind of loads her abdominal wall muscles. Up. Yeah, there we go. Then back down. So there we'll see that
I haven't done a sit-up in so long.
through the range. So Amanda's not super, she's very, very able. But through the range of a full sit-up, you'll see that if she does it one more time, so she's good, and then she starts to lose it, and then her abdominal obliques become super dominant there, and that's something where we would want to train her.
So let's have a closer look at the images we've recorded of our client's head and neck curl-up task, and in particular we'll pay attention to the behavior of the internal oblique, the transversus abdominis, and its impact on its fascial attachment, which eventually blends and becomes part of the midline abdominal fascia. Now, as we instruct our client to lift her head and neck up into a curl-up task or an abdominal curl, we'll see that initially there is a concentric contraction, which is represented by a bulging of both muscles, and more importantly, a relative lateral slide or lateral position of the transversus abdominis in relation to the internal oblique. In this condition, there is thought to be maintenance of the tension along the midline abdominal fascia, or its attachment to the head of transversus abdominis here, and that's thought to be representative of optimal load transfer across the sides of the abdominal wall, and representative of adequate force closure for the lumbopelvic region. As we continue to observe the behavior of the muscles as our client continues into her curl-up task, we'll see that there's actually a loss of that lateral position of the transversus abdominis here relative to the internal oblique muscle, which may be correlated with a relative loss of tension along its fascial attachment to what becomes the midline abdominal fascia, which is correlated with reduction in adequate load transfer between the sides of the abdominal wall, and may represent a suboptimal strategy for producing force closure for the lumbopelvic region, which can sometimes result in lumbar or pelvic girdle pain. So as we continue to observe what happens in our client's abdominal wall as she continues to rise into her crunch, we'll see that at the very top of her range there's the greatest amount of concentric contraction activity of the internal oblique, represented by this large amount of bulging of the muscle here, which is fine. But we also see that she's able to regain this lateral position of her transversus abdominis muscle and good tension again on this fascia that will become the midline abdominal fascia. What's interesting now is as she lowers herself back down to the table, often a difficult task for people with low back pain or postpartum moms, as it poses a very large challenge to the strength and power of the abdominal wall. We'll see that there's, again, a very similar period of time where there's a bit of a loss of that lateral position of the transversus abdominis here. We'll see that it's kind of lost that lateral slide position relative to her internal oblique as she's lowering down. And again, also a resultant relative loss of the tension along that midline abdominal fascia, or the transversus abdominis attachment to that fascia. And then as her head and shoulders touch down onto the table surface, we'll see again that the muscles return to their resting state. So now let's have a look at the impact of a specific motor control cue on the behavior of the muscles of our client's abdominal wall in the same task in the same session. And often what we'll find when we're working with clients is that a suboptimal strategy that's resultant because of poor coordination of the transversus abdominis can readily be changed within a session to become more optimal with improved awareness of the muscles of the abdominal wall. And so in our client here, we'll see that she's now able to pre-contract the transversus abdominis here, as noted by the corseting and slight lateral slide before she lifts her head and neck up into her task, and that she's now able to maintain that lateral position relative to the internal oblique through the concentric and the eccentric phases of her head and neck curl up, all the way through, representing a more optimal pattern of muscle contraction and improved force closure of the lumbopelvic region as she moves through her curl-up task.